the deed has been done, Jarvis. At 4 p.m. Eastern Time, the clock struck for the 53-man roster in Flowery Branch. So we now technically know what the roster is going to look like for September 10th. And of course, we know anything can happen between now and then, especially because we know that there are 16 players who can be signed to the practice squad today. And we expect that some of these players who may have been let go on Tuesday would come back. So want to preface by saying that. And of course, we'll keep you guys posted on that progress and we'll react to some of those moves as well. But yeah, it was very, very interesting because I think a lot of people were kind of sitting back with bated breath to kind of see, especially, and you and I talked about that yesterday, there were some players who were on the bubble. Now, when you look in the QB room, no shock there. You look in the running back room, no shock there. We already talked about the fullback room as well. Wide receiver room, tight end room, O-line is another one. I think for the most part, we're settled on. D-line, you might want to talk about that. I'll be interested to hear. But let's start this way. Let's start on the offensive side of the ball and start with your surprise saves on the offensive side of the ball. Who would you say, oh, wow, didn't see that coming?
Probably Josh Ali. But here's why I say that. Because of, him being a guy who was kind of like, flew under the radar, but he was always a guy. Every time I, would be up at practice, I was like, oh, okay, that was a nice catch. Or I like the effort there, and also he's another guy that, is going to be able to be big for you on special teams. So I think that was the first one offensively. And then secondly, it had to be that tight end room. Now, I had a good idea that Arthur Smith was going to go with 4 tight ends. Makes all the sense in the world, right? If you basically your base offense is basically 12 personnel, like he likes to run those 2 tights out there. So to have backups for both of those, so to speak, it makes all the sense in the world. But I think that Parker Hesse getting cut for John Fitzpatrick, I was just like, oh, okay, our girl. Tori McElhaney for AtlantaFalcons.com was adamant about John Fitzpatrick's making a roster. So I was just like, oh, okay.
Yeah, but, that kind of tipped the hand a little bit.
Yeah, kind of tipped the hand a little bit. As well she should be. She is excellent at what she does. So I think that those were the 2 things that really stood out to me offensively. Just from a standpoint of okay, I get it. From a production standpoint and what they were able to do in practice and showing the coaches. But it was just like, oh, okay. It was kind of just a little slight switch up. Not a big surprise, but, it was just definitely something that made you say,
I would agree. And I think that maybe when you look at Parker Hesse, the only thing I can think, 2 things I can think of. Number one is you look at Kyle Pitts and particularly Jonnu Smith, and maybe Michael Pruitt, and you say to yourself, does Parker Hesse give me anything different, maybe? And maybe he's giving you a little Jonnu Smith, if you will, but Jonnu Smith would be maybe the upgrade, and whereas John Fitzpatrick may bring a little something different to the table. And that in all likelihood, you can bring Parker Hesse back on that practice squad and then possibly bring him back on the roster, on an as-needed basis. So it'll be interesting to see, but I would agree with you. I think most of us figured that John Fitzpatrick definitely had a shot because people like Tori, who are close to the situation, so to speak, kind of hinted at, it might be him. But I think there was still like a little bit of a surprise that it ended up being him. Now, John Fitzpatrick would be the surprise save cut for you, right? And so the surprise maybe cut would have been Parker Hesse. Was there anyone else on offense whom you said, whoa, okay, that's a surprise cut. Didn't see that coming? Anyone else?
Well, to be honest with you, not really. Not really, because Tyler Vrabel and Jalen Mayfield, I was like, they had their audition to, against the Pittsburgh Steelers, and they didn't show well, and now they're not on the team. So, but I wouldn't be surprised if a guy like Vrabel ends up on the practice squad. You know what I mean? So, being that he was waived, so that means that he's eligible for that. So I wouldn't be surprised if he pops back on, but. Just overall, though, no real big surprise, cuts offensively, though.
Indeed. Now, on the defensive side of the ball, that was interesting as well because there was a little bit of commentary, especially in the linebacker room in particular. But for you, when you looked across that space and said, hey, here's where I think the Falcons might go and here's where they went, what would be your surprise? What would be your surprise saves?
Wow, it would probably be Albert Huggins, because I'm thinking Timmy Horne. That will be the
Yeah.
guy that that will
Yeah.
stick around. But when you just take a moment just to kind of think about where this team is this
Mm-hmm.
year. Like when you look at that the defensive linemen that are on this roster, all those guys that are guys that can play, they are
Yes.
going to play. They don't really
Indeed.
have any guys that are kind of project guys like they did last year. And that just speaks
Mm-hmm.
to the level of talent that you have on this year
Yeah.
versus last year. And I
Yeah.
think that that's kind of where Arthur Smith said he was. Like, this is going to be a competitive camp. You had a guy like Timmy Horne make the squad last year. He was a good
Mm-hmm.
story. I thought he
Yes.
did. I thought he had a solid preseason, but it's not an indictment on him. It's just the
No.
fact that, hey, we have better defensive
Yes.
linemen on this roster. And I think that when you talk about though that rotation that
Yep.
Ryan Nielsen wants to roll with this year, and pretty much everybody's going to play and get a significant amount of snaps this year, and divvy those things up a little bit. You gotta say, hey, you know what? We appreciate you, for what you did for us last year, but
Yeah.
it is time to, it's time to get to another level in this thing.
Yeah, I agree with you. Now, I would say the same with only one caveat, but I still think your point is well taken and your point is accurate. Zach Harrison is probably the closest you'll get to a project. So in that regard, you're absolutely right.
That's
And
fair.
he's
That's
and
fair.
look, I say as close as you get to a project because let's just be honest. Calais Campbell has him under his wing. He's going
No
to be
doubt.
just
Indeed.
fine. So
Yeah, he'll be
that's why
fine.
I say you can call him a project. Whereas, and also to your point, Timmy Horne had all the time and opportunity in the world from his quote unquote resume with the Falcons last season and anything that he did this past offseason to show them that, hey, I should make the roster. Zach Harrison is a current pick. It would have been very difficult to just, cut him just as an example. If you're talking about a project and which one makes
Right.
the most sense to kind of retain, that would be Zach Harrison because he's a rookie. So there's nothing but upside for them to see for him. So I definitely understand that one in terms of it was a little shocking, but then it was like, okay, well, it's understandable as it relates to the project you choose versus the project that you wouldn't. But yeah, Huggins, show improved, sir. Show improved. Now, outside linebacker seemed to be interesting as well for a lot of people. Nobody was shocked, of course, with Bud Dupree, Arnold Ebiketie, Low Carter. Everybody was like, okay, well, and we can agree that was no different than when we saw that the Falcons re-signed him. We thought he was on the
Yeah, they
bubble
bought him back
then.
for a reason. Yeah.
Exactly. Right. So when you brought him back, not that you didn't do the same with Parker Hesse, but to our point, in particular with the linebacker core where you could have gone anywhere, you definitely weren't in a situation where you had to re-sign him and you did. So I wouldn't call that a super surprise, but D'Angelo Malone seemed to make a few folks like, okay. But was that a
Yeah.
surprise for you? Or I would even go to say a Nate Landman on the inside or Tay Davis?
No, it was no surprise for me because Tay Davis had been having an excellent camp. He was out there making plays, and when he had an extended amount of playing time against the Steelers, like you saw, like okay, this
Yeah.
guy might be a
I
guy
think
that can
that's
be a
what made
solid
it for
backup.
him. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like that was a prime opportunity for some guys, and Arthur Smith even kind of said it as such when he talking about like guys getting opportunities to go up against some starting caliber guys, and they if they show well they those that's some eye popping stuff. And like, okay, you can kind of make a roster. If you show well against a starting caliber NFL player. So
Yes.
I think that, and then D'Angelo Malone and Nate Landman, Nate Landman for sure. Like that is one of their guys. Like Nate Landman, that's no surprise at all. I know for a fact that guy was going to make this squad. And then D'Angelo Malone, he got an extensive amount of playing time. You saw him put some pressure. You make the quarterback move off the spot. I think just right now, for me, for Malone, I think that it's time for him to kind of make sure that he's doing the technical things just
Yeah.
from the way he lines up and just kind of angles and everything like that when it comes to rushing off the edge, because he's close, but it's just all about just tweaking a little thing here and there. And I'm sure Ryan Nielsen is going to work with him on that, just so he
Yeah.
can get home and put the quarterback on the ground, because that's why he was
Indeed.
brought in.
Yeah, and I would say the same for him. Like, I think it was more of, we're just all waiting. Like, we haven't seen the flash, but we kind of want to see the flash, and we're kind of trying to figure it out with him. But I think on the same token, they're waiting to see the flash as well. And I think
Yeah.
that's part of the reason why he got the extensive time during the preseason so that they could say, okay, we can truly justify, like, we're seeing something and we think we can work with that and get him to where we want him to be for the regular season. And I would say everybody else in terms of the DB room, I think we were good to go. I think we mostly called that yesterday. And our only question at this point is, will there be any changes potentially to the DB room based on Malcolm Butler's visit? So, of course, we will keep you guys updated on the progress there. We'll talk a little bit more about the practice squad and just continue to march you guys to the first day, the first game of the regular season for the Falcons. But hey, did you guys have any surprises that you saw on that 53-man roster, either surprise saves or surprise cuts? Let us know, everydayers. Don't forget to drop a line in the chat when you check us out on YouTube. And of course, download us wherever you get your podcast.